Hey Matthew, you happy just introduce yourself to us, please?
Yeah, my name's Matthew Andersen. I'm a clinical coder here at North Tees.
Brilliant. So I know things have been a little bit different for the past year for you. Can you walk us through a little bit about what's changed?
Yeah, I mean, two years ago, just over 2 years ago, I was like a completely different person. I was going by a different name, and I didn't even realise that I was actually a man. All my life before that, I thought I was female.
And so when did you realise that you were trans? How old were you?
I was a bit of a late bloomer. I was actually like 28 when I realised that I was transgender. Looking back at my life, at my childhood, all the signs were there. It's just I didn't piece them together, as realising that's what that was.
And when did you begin your physical transition, if you like?
Yeah, my physical transition, I suppose, would be when I started testosterone, like hormones, that brought about like physical changes. And I actually started that just under a year ago, in July 2020. So I'm coming up to my 1 year anniversary quite soon.
Have you got anything nice planned for your anniversary?
I'm having a party. I'm calling it my manniversary.
Brilliant. It is obviously the big change.
Mhm.
What was it like leading up to that moment?
When puberty came, and obviously I was like developing a chest, I always knew that I didn't like it, and the fact that it was growing bigger and it was, it wasn't something I could hide, it always caused me distress, and it always made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't really know why. And then when I came to that realization point that I was living in the wrong body, and it was like that glass shattering moment. Sort of very quickly became unbearable because all of a sudden I knew what the problem was, and I knew I felt wrong, but at the time it felt like there was nothing I could do about it. And so it's like all of a sudden you sort of feel trapped, and every time looking in a mirror or looking down at my body or just catching my reflection and looking back and just feeling like there was something wrong. Now, when I look at photos of myself, like pre-transition, I recognise that person in those photos, but that person isn't me.
Sort of like a second life, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely, I do feel like my life started once, especially getting top surgery on my chest. I felt like I can start my life now. This is when I start my life. Pre-transition was sort of like prequel, and this is where the real, it's not just a new chapter, it's a new book, and it's the start of my story. Everything before transition helped me get to be the person who I am today.
So one of the things we understand is that trans people prefer not to discuss their past names. Can you talk us through a little bit about why this is?
For me, like before I changed my name, my birth name is unisex name. So there was some thoughts about whether I would change my name because I could still go by that name and that would be an appropriate name for me. And even though I didn't have any problems really with my previous name, it didn't feel like it reflected me. For a lot of trans people, I think it represents a time in their life that was very difficult and maybe traumatic for them. So having that reminder is very difficult. I suppose it'd be like if you change your name because you got married, and maybe that was a very difficult relationship and maybe and a harmful relationship for you, and then you got remarried, or after that relationship broke up and you change your name, people start calling you by that first name. That's going to remind you of a difficult time in your life, and that's the sort of thing I can link it to.
So what was it like when you began telling people that you were Matthew?
Well, I think because my name was unisex, I didn't start going by Matthew straight away. I told people I was transgender and that I was going by like he, him pronouns first. The first thing I did, I wrote a letter to like my immediate family, and I sent that out in the post. Once I'd done that, I knew I wanted to tell my mum, who I'm really close with. I wanted to tell her in person, and I knew that once I'd posted those letters, I obviously had a deadline. So I think that helped, because it's like, I can't put this off because I need to tell her before this letter comes. I adjusted my letter to put it on Facebook, because obviously, you know, everything's official once it's on Facebook. That's how you tell a lot of people at once. And I also asked my manager to forward that post on to my colleagues. I took the Monday off, and I told people, I'm not going to be here, so take this out, talk about it with people, talk about it with each other. You know, I want this to be something we can talk about. I think that's important, because I think, again, that's another thing that non-trans people sort of worry about, is like saying the wrong thing in front of a trans person. So I wanted to like tell people, you know, anything's all right, and if it's not, if I feel uncomfortable with it, then I will let you know.
You've spoken about your teammates, your colleagues being very supportive. Are there any other aspects of the trust? How are they supporting you, and do you feel that you're being treated well and equally by the trust as a whole?
Yeah, I would definitely say I feel like I've been treated equally. I don't think like the fact that I'm transgender has ever been an issue at work. I mean, the very first person I spoke to, I think the very first person I said those words out loud, saying that I'm transgender, was somebody at work. It was our inclusion lead for gender and gender reassignment and sexuality, Stuart Harper Reynolds. And immediately, like after I'd sort of come to the realisation that I was transgender, he was one of the first persons I spoke to, because I was interested in knowing what support I would have in the trust. So he was the first person I ever said that out loud to, and he was just so supportive and helpful. I had to go like things like HR and to change my name, and like to IT to change like my emails and logins and everything like that, and going to security, because obviously I had to change the photo and name on my badge. And everybody I've ever encountered is just not batted an eyelid, and it's just normalised it, which is what I've always wanted, not making a big fuss and not drawing attention to it.
Obviously, trans people are much more in media now. We're seeing a lot more of them. It's widely talked about issue. What would you like people to understand about being trans?
I think the first most important thing I would say is just like trans people are just people like everybody else. You know, we've got the same wants, you know, like everybody else. You know, ultimately they're just people who want to be like loved and respected and accepted. It's okay to sort of ask questions, you know, in the right, that are genuine questions. You know, some questions are like, you think you're just curiosity, but they can be a bit disrespectful. Things like asking a trans person about like their genitals, or like how they have sex, or like asking someone out of context, obviously, like what their birth name is, or things like that. You know, it's not relevant. You know, it's not something you would ask any other person. You wouldn't ask a cisgendered person like about their genitals or how they have sex. So there's no reason to sort of ask those questions about a transgender person.
Despite trans people being much more visible now, there is obviously still a lot of discrimination in the community against trans people, regardless of where they are in their transition. Do you have any key messages that you would want to say to people who are bigoted?
I think I would ask them to question why they have this prejudice against transgender people. And because for me, it makes no sense. Like, logically speaking, it makes no sense. I think a lot of it comes from like fear, and it's fear of this unknown and this sort of new thing that they're not understanding. It's misinformation a lot. Even if you don't know any other trans people, or if, you don't have that experience, just being supportive and just being seen to be supportive can change somebody's life. It can change their day. Like, even just sort of respecting somebody's pronouns in passing, can make the world of a difference. It's like, I can still remember the first time that a stranger gendered me correctly. It's just a bloke behind a stall, saying, "Oh, thanks, mate." And that just, I remember that so keenly and so vividly, and that just made me grin and just made me smile for the rest of the day.
And why do you think it's important that our trust as a healthcare provider is supportive of trans people?
For our patients, I know a lot of transgender people especially are afraid to access healthcare because they're worried about discrimination, when something as simple as making sure we have safe spaces and people they feel like they can talk to and who are going to treat them with respect and treat them as valid people could save lives, I think.
And what about you? What are your ambitions for the future?
Well, transition wise, I guess bottom surgery is something I'm not entirely sure if that's what I want yet. Like, at the moment I'm quite comfortable, so that could be on the horizon at some point down the line. I've got no immediate plans for that. I want to be able to keep talking about my experiences and keep hoping, like, the more I talk about things, like, hopefully that will help somebody, even if it just helps somebody, one person, for like 1 minute of their lives, makes them feel better, then it's all worth it. I like everybody else, I want to grow and find someone who I love and who loves me, and I do want to be a parent. I do want to be a dad, I guess. I think a lot of people sort of, when I've transitioned, sort of assume that because I've transitioned and I'm not, like, presenting as a woman anymore, means I don't want to have kids. And I would like to be a dad. I would like to be a parent. I just don't want to give birth to them myself, but I would still like to have a child, I think.
Thank you very much for speaking with me today, Matthew.
No problem. Thanks
It's been very insightful.